Wait,
that leads to an illusion of causality.
I mean, listen, if you disagree with the scientists, the sociologists, and the economists, I mean, sure, I mean, you can have your critiques. I mean, I'll choose to trust them. Generally,
I wipe my ass with their studies.
Okay.
I print their studies and I wipe my ass with it. That's how I disagree with.
Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. This is going to be a fun one, folks. Want to let you know, if it's your first time here to Modern Day Debate, we are a nonpartisan platform that hosts debates on science, politics, and religion with the purpose of giving everyone their fair shot to make their case on an equal playing field. We are very excited for this one tonight and want to let you know, though, if it's your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we have many more debates to come in case you want reminders. And what we're going to do is, for tonight's format, it's going to be pretty flexible. So it's going to be like roughly 10 minutes from each side, and then open conversation after those openers. The open conversation will probably go from 50 to 60 minutes or so, and then Q&A, which would be about 30 minutes. So if you have a question, feel free to fire it into the old live chat. If you tag me with that Modern Day Debate, it makes it easier for me to get every question in that list for the Q&A. And then Super Chat is also an option, which allows you to make a comment toward one of the speakers for the Q&A, as well as a question if you'd like. And they, of course, would get a chance to respond to the comment or question. And Super Chats will push your question or comment to the top of the list for the Q&A. So without any further ado, want to get to the actual introductions of what these guys do. So we're excited to have these guys and want to let you know they're linked in the description, folks. So if you want to hear more of them, you can at those links down below. We'll start with JF, who's on the top left of your screen. And so JF, if you could give just an idea of what people might be able to find at your link below in the description, want to say thanks for being here.
Well, you can join my Twitter at JF Gariepy, and I'm at JFG live streams on YouTube. I do an everyday show at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, and I am an author, a neuroscientist. I am also a YouTuber now. I'm interested in the beginnings of life. If you want to buy my book, buy The Revolutionary Phenotype. That's my most important work. But I also like to discuss politics, which we'll do tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I'll put that link for that book in the description as well. Thanks for that, JF. And want to welcome Dario, first timer. We're thrilled to have you, Dario. Thanks for being with us. And if you want to just kind of share what people can find at your Twitch channel, which is linked in the description.
Yeah, so my Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Dario Rahim. Same goes for Twitter and for YouTube. I generally do debate content, so content focused around talking to people, both in my chat or like otherwise on the internet, as is this fabulous show that I'm on today. I do call-ins from my viewers, so if you ever have like an interesting opinion, something that you like to share, you can always join my chat and sort of let me know, and we can have a conversation about it, and everybody can jump in if they have like some sort of like interesting perspective. It's very diverse in terms of political opinions. We have like conservatives, liberals, socialists, anarchists, libertarians. We have all the good stuff. So yeah, hopefully some of you guys will tune in, and I hope we'll have a fantastic conversation today.
Absolutely. So very excited, folks. Want to let you know, as mentioned, we're a nonpartisan channel. So no matter what walk of life you come from, folks, we do hope you feel welcome. Will you be far left, far right, Trump supporter, gay, straight, you name it, we're glad you're here. And so with that, we're going to jump into the open, or I should say the openings. And JF, the floor is all yours.
All right, so today the question is whether we should have more or less immigration. My position is that we should have less in terms of policy. I believe it is not beneficial for the people currently in the US or in other European nations to increase the number of migrants. And in fact, we should reduce it. And given the cost of immigration that I'm about to go through in 6 different subcategories, given these costs, the question could be, how much should we reduce? Well, how much should we reduce of something that hurts us or something that's negative for us? Well, we should reduce it down to 0. There is no amount of infliction on European economies that is worth it, as long as the as long as the final effect of immigration is negative on all of the measures that I'm about to list, why would we want any of it? So let's get started. I have divided the impacts of immigration in 6 subcategories that I think matter a lot. There's certainly more. There are hidden costs of what we're doing with the demographics of our nation. However, there are 6 identifiable, easily recordable ones, and so they are worth discussing. First, immigration is a skewing force in the market that keeps an infinite flow of workforce available for companies. This flow of workforce is detrimental to the capacity of the lower stages of the workforce, that is the low-skilled workers. It diminishes their capacity to negotiate for higher salary and to eventually become themselves and their work a scarce resource. So everyone knows in economics that the way a resource can become valuable is because people want it and it is scarce. The problem with human work is that as long as there are new additional adults showing up in your nation, human work never becomes quite rare. And this disempowers workers to be able to negotiate, both in the private sector and self-employed people, as well as people who regroup together in unions. The negotiating power of these people is lowered by the presence of a competing force, an infinite flow. And I say infinite because there's no sign that our governments ever want to stop immigration. So an infinite flow of competitive agents that can offer to the economy what we were supposed to offer. That is arms, brains, quality of work, skills, all of it being its value being diminished because some alternative work is available. This is demonstrated in a study by George J. Borjas and Lawrence F. Katz. There's an article in 2017 in the book Mexican Immigration to the U.S. The title of their article is Mexican Immigration to the United States. They evaluate that an increase of 10% of the representation of immigrants in a given subpopulation in the US will result in 3 to 4% decreases in salary for native workers. That's just a shot at evaluating the true impact. The true impact is hidden because of inflation, because a dollar from 1996 is not worth a dollar from 2020. And so because of this, much wealth is getting diluted in the US. So it's impossible to know exactly today by how much your salary is cut because of the federal policies and state policies on immigration. But we know it's certainly cut by a lot. And their first attempt at quantifying it was from 3 to 4%. Second argument and second cost that we typically don't record as an economic cost, but it is a human cost. The clash of cultures caused by immigration leads gullible natives to be faced with losses of freedom that they did not expect could even exist. There are cases of women in our nations, and I'm thinking of a case in particular, Nathalie Morin in Quebec. They find themselves charmed by a migrant. In this case, Nathalie Morin, she was a white Quebecois who married a Muslim from Saudi Arabia. And she found herself thinking, well, it makes sense that I go to Saudi Arabia to visit his family. It makes total sense. We'll go there with our children and we'll come back and everything will be good. It's not what happened. Nathalie Morin has been imprisoned in the house of her husband in Saudi Arabia for the last 10 years. What she did not realize is that the rights that she benefits from under a white society like Quebec, she doesn't have in Saudi Arabia. And every year there are it's hard to count how many females fall for this trap where they lose their rights because they find themselves in another country in which all rights are given to the father. So in this case, Nathalie Morin finds herself physically imprisoned in the house of her husband. Her husband suddenly told her, no, we're not going back to Quebec. You are under Saudi Arabia law here, and I'm taking ownership of your entire life. And here I decide what you do. And if you go back to Quebec, you'll never see your kids again. And he has the right to do it under Saudi Arabia law. So this is a cost of deception, a cost of fooling white native women into lifestyles that they did not consent to. And the economic cost is hard to put a number on here. We lost a beautiful woman. We lost a woman who could have participated to the Quebec economy. And most importantly, she lost her own rights. Third cost of immigration. Immigrants represent a net fiscal burden on countries because they pay less taxes than white natives and benefit from either equal or more welfare programs, depending on the immigrant category. So in the New Americans, economic, demographic, and fiscal effects of immigration in 1997 by the National Research Council and the National Academy of Science, it is evaluated that in California, a household made up of natives represents a net gain of $1,178 for the state per year. A household of Latin American migrants represents a net loss of $4,977. This means that for every Latin American household, you need to have 5 white native households to even just support their cost in terms of welfare, and you don't get the tax backs. Now, this is a number that demonstrates the unsustainability of immigration. As long as we have more households of immigrants consuming more benefits from the state, there will come a clash. There will come a point at which the state is either unable to tax to continue giving these benefits or unable to keep the quality of its benefits to the population. And this is a special study because it is one in which a particularly model type of immigrants, the Asians, often quoted as the type of migrants that do not cause much crime, do not cost much to the society. They have a great culture of hard work, but they still cost more to the state than white natives. White natives are contributing a net positive of $1,178. Asian households are costing $2,591. So on average, Asians are consumers of benefits more than they pay. So in terms of the economic cost of immigration, it makes absolutely no sense to continue this system that keeps increasing the number of immigrant households in America. It is simply not ecologically viable and not economically viable. Interestingly, in the study, the only category of migrants that was net positive for the state were the Europeans and Canadian migrants at $1,308. Hispanic immigrant household use some sort of welfare program, whether it's from healthcare or for food, at 69.5%, compared to native whites at 23.1%. In comparison, even if you take the immigrant white population, they are at 34.9%. So there are enormous costs to changing the demographics of your country through immigration. And these statistics came from Stephen Camarota, 2015, Welfare Used by Immigrant and Native Households, an analysis of Medicaid, cash, food, and housing programs. The fourth cost of immigration is that more prisoners are sentenced from minority backgrounds than whites. Per 100,000 residents, 449 are white, 3,457 prisoners are Black, and 1,220 are Hispanic. This is from the Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2000. And on top of it, having immigrants in your nation also means that there are criminal networks whose location are in South America. They now have a foot in the United States, thus contributing to human trafficking and drug smuggling. So you will probably hear from my opponent tonight that this is not true, that immigrants have been shown to be less criminal than the native. That is only true if you heavily restrict the definition of an immigrant as being someone who's currently in a temporary status. Now, I don't deny that someone currently in a temporary status will create less crime, but that's because, of course, they are scared of losing their status if they get caught. The fact is, when you consider the effect of immigration, you must not just consider the people as they have their green card, whether they commit a crime. It's whether they will commit a crime down the road or whether their descendants will commit a crime. When you evaluate the effect of immigration on society, you must include the changes to your demographics and the changes that these demographics have on criminality. And there, it makes no doubt, immigration in the long run is changing the demographics of our country and is increasing the amount of crimes. Fifth point on, yes, what?
Go ahead. I'd say maybe roughly several more minutes left and then we'll switch it over.
Okay, perfect. Fifth point, immigrants are less educated. In 2008, about 90% of white adults had completed high school, compared to less than 63% for Hispanic. This is from Odd, Fox, and Kewal Ramani from 2010. Of course, I have my reservations concerning the public school system of the US, but it remains the case that accomplishment in school is it's a proxy for other measures of success. First, for cognitive performance, second for success later in life, and in fact, to some extent, it is a correlate of whether you would engage in criminal activities or not. So we must be aware that when we invite migrant populations in, we are severely changing the constitution of our nation and not for the best. Point 6. Immigrants are favorable to leftist economics and politics, which are fundamentally incompatible with America. Support for bigger government. The Hispanic are at 61%, the Blacks are at 68%, the Asians are at 58%. So very interesting here that the Asians are still very high for big government, although they're making a lot of money. That's another measure in which even Asian immigration, I oppose to it. Not specifically that type of immigration. In fact, I oppose to all types, but there it is, Asian at 58%, whereas whites are the only ethnicity for which they support a smaller government. They only support the bigger government at 38%. The only ethnicity where the majority favors a smaller government. This is from the Religious Landscape Survey, Pew Research 2014. And the state of free speech and tolerance in America, that's a text by Emily Ekins, 2017 at the Cato Institute. There is a problem in which certain ethnicity in the US are approaching the problem of free speech in a way that is simply anti-constitutional. They have stated a couple of sentences to people and they ask, do you agree or do you not agree? Here's one example. Do you support someone's right to say racist things is as bad as holding racist views yourself? So would you say that supporting someone's right to say, just to say racist things is just as bad as being racist? 68% of Blacks say they agree. 61% of Hispanic agree. 58% of Asian, no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong numbers here. 65% of Black agree. 61% of Latino agree. Only 34% of whites agree. Same thing for other questions such as, is hate speech an act of violence? And do you agree that people who don't respect others don't deserve the right of free speech? Essentially, whites are the only ethnic minority in this nation who support the First Amendment. So you have to ask yourself, if you're going to continue inviting more and more migrants in, are you okay with them overturning the Constitution? People are asking themselves this question seriously as they see more and more of a rise of far leftism in the streets of the US, where the people are claiming that it is racist, for example, to undo an act of vandalism, or that it is racist to own a house, and that they should give up their property to these incoming migrant populations. What we have here is a problem of sustainability of the American Constitution under the demographic problem that we have caused ourselves. And the answer to it is, let us stop causing more of this problem. Let us reduce immigration, restore the state of the Republic, restore the primacy of the American Constitution, and deal with the only demographics that's willing to support it: white people of America.
You got it. Thank you very much, JF. We'll kick it over to Dario. Thanks so much, Dario, for being here as well. And I want to mention, folks, in the chat, we have been told that we have too few conservative moderators. So let us know. Moderators, here we allow them if they want to make their position or opinion made known. We're okay with that. We only ask the moderators to basically clean up hate speech. So pretty easygoing rules. And so if you are conservative leaning and you would like to be a moderator, let me know, as we do want to have balance there, as we do have a lot of left leaning friends as moderators already. And so we'll kick it over to Dario. Thanks so much, Dario. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. Okay, so that was a lot from. I honestly didn't expect you to have so much, but I'm very glad that you brought up like the stuff that you did, and I think we're gonna have a fruitful conversation. In my opening statement, I'll mostly just be going through like my positive arguments for my stance, and then maybe towards the end, I'll maybe sort of just broadly address some of your claims. So generally, my stance is more immigration, but I think the logical extension to that is a kind of, as you alluded to, is actually open borders. And I think that tonight I will be somewhat also arguing for the stance of open borders, because I think it is intellectually honest to sort of argue the logical extensions of what our systems entail. So the reason why I support open borders is because it seems to be the most economically efficient, the most libertarian, the most egalitarian, the most utilitarian way to sort of increase the world's wealth and production and make everybody better off, basically. But open borders isn't just like the most economic beneficial decision in your own self-interest you can make. It's also the most moral option. So first, let's talk economics. So labor is a resource. Closed borders is a way to lower the amount of that resource and create what's called a deadweight loss. And a deadweight loss is generally is a cost to society that comes from market inefficiencies, which occur when supply and demand are out of sync for whatever reason. And protectionist policies, or closed borders in general, sort of serve to mess with the market and put restrictions on it. And just like most deadweight losses, you can sort of measure the loss from restricting immigration pretty accurately, it seems. And there's been a number of studies, like so many studies that are peer-reviewed academic journals about this. And I sort of looked at a meta-study of this, called Leaving Trillion Dollar Bills on the Sidewalk. And it basically says that the median estimate deadweight loss from having closed border policies is 100% of the world's GDP. That means that right now, the world product and wealth should be at about $150 trillion, but because of closed borders, it's only at about 75. So it's an entire world of product that is destroyed because of closed border policies. Now, any cost-benefit analysis that we can do tells us that any bad stuff that happens from open borders, potential bad stuff, any consequences you can possibly think of, had better be worth $75 trillion. And then let's sort of talk about the moral aspect, which I think is also very important when we talk about immigration. There's sort of thought experiment put forward by the philosopher Michael Huemer about a guy called Starvin Marvin. And it goes like this. Starvin Marvin is starving, and he's about to go to the market and sell something that's going to make him not starve. He's about to go there, but instead you intercept him. And you go there armed with your friends and your guns, and you stop him in his tracks and make sure that he can't sell his product. So he starves. In this case, his blood is on your hands. It's not necessarily your fault that he was starving in the first place or that he was poor, but you're actively intervening to prevent him from making a life-saving trade. It's not like, don't think of it like walking down the street and seeing a homeless person and not giving that person $5. It's more like you walk down the street and you see a homeless person washing someone's car, and you go in and scare them away and stop the trade. You're actively intervening to cause harm, to stop a trade with a willing stranger. And that's sort of what closed borders are. It's violence against people who would like to make voluntary trades with each other. So what are some of the main arguments that I hear from people who want to restrict immigration? And I guess JF kind of alluded to this. Usually people will say immigrants cause crime, immigrants will lower wages, or immigrants will destroy our culture. So there's been a lot of studies about this, and I've sipped through quite a few. So the first point to immigrants cause crime, and it sort of makes intuitive sense, I guess, to some people. Places with a lot of immigrants are usually places with high crime. But does that mean that the immigrants are committing the crime? Well, no. It turns out, not really. A lot of immigrants are poor. Immigrants move to poor places. Poor places usually have higher crime, but they aren't committing the crimes. And how do we know this? Well, there's a ton of studies about this. The 2010 census data reveals that incarceration rates among young, less educated immigrant men are significantly lower than those of young native-born men. Young natives get incarcerated at about 3.5 times the rate of young immigrants. Then people will say immigrants will lower wages, and GF sort of alluded to this as well. Again, there's a tons of studies about this. I mean, we can go through them and sort of go through the weeds, but what it seems to be, the more that this is studied, and I understand, and JF sort of mentioned some of the older studies that have previously been refuted, but any newer studies, any like economists right now that are sort of advocating for immigration, like all of these will tell you pretty vehemently that the vast majority of American wages rise because of immigration. Like generally the only group of people that sort of see any decrease over like a very short term is high school dropouts, which are less than 10% of the population. And they only see like 2% drop in like actual wages, and that sort of equals out to like 1%. And again, a cost-benefit analysis tells us that the vast amount of wealth and product that is being generated from open immigration policies can easily account for this by any sort of redistribution. Like just very small, even very small redistributional policies can easily account for this. And then there's sort of the culture argument. I guess it's kind of always kind of esoteric and weird to talk about like something as sort of broad and unconcrete as culture. I guess in my opening statement, I'll just say that the Western world is already so diverse, so massive, and is already improved and enriched by immigrants everywhere, both economically, but through like culture, through food, through music. And the culture capitals of this world are the cities with the most immigrants, the highest economic growth, and are the most desirable places to live. And how much time do I have, James?
I would say, let me just pull it open here.
Oh, sure. I'll just go a little bit and sort of jump
at least
through.
4 more minutes.
Sure. I'll just jump through some of JF's arguments, like just in an overview fashion. So I think there's like a little bit of misinterpreting studies, or like not telling the entire truth, or using old data. And like in terms of like the cost of immigration, like every single economist that's worth anything is going to tell you that immigrants are a net benefit to the economy. And recent studies even show that there are a fiscal, usually like negligible fiscal loss short term, or like a wash, like between that. I mean, there's a reason why it's like 1,400 economists sent Trump a letter, like just after he started pushing for like his border wall, saying that he should change his stance on immigration to support like more immigration. 1,400 economists came together. And I guess we can sort of go into the loss of freedom a little bit, although I don't want to dwell too much on that. As a libertarian, I generally think that we should try to create the most amount of freedom and the best lives for the people that we can. And that sort of goes for all of the people of the world, like not just the people within sort of my, I guess, in my city or whatever. And that, I guess that's sort of a moral position. Yeah, in terms of, I guess, in terms of immigrants being more favorable to like leftist economic and politics, yeah, that's good. That's a good thing. I mean, I don't mind that. I think there's a lot of complicated reasons why that is the case in the U.S. I mean, that's not necessarily the case in many places in the world. I know in Denmark that's not necessarily the case. In the US, it's complicated because the Republican Party, which is the only like real representation of like conservatism or the right that they have, is just insanely racist. Because they do stuff like the Southern strategy, and like they try and appeal to racists. So while a lot of immigrants, like specifically like Hispanic or like people from people from Cuba and stuff, like they generally have pretty conservative views. But if like one party literally just wants to deport you, and that's like their policies or whatever, and they try and fuck you over every turn they can, obviously you're gonna vote for the other like party regardless of their policies, pretty much. Yeah, I believe that was it.
Thank you very much, and we'll jump into open conversation then.
All right. Well, I'm quite astonished by the pile of crap that we've been served here tonight. A libertarian who wants to introduce leftists to the U.S. to make it more leftist. Absolutely unbelievable. This is exactly why libertarians have lost all credibility.
Wait, you do realize that libertarianism isn't necessarily like a right-wing ideology, right? It started literally as a left-wing ideology and it's been co-opted by the right wing in the US. Like libertarianism isn't this sort of like ANCAP like paradise. And anarchism, again, that's another philosophy on the left that doesn't have like a big state or like revolves around like big redistributions from the state, right? I mean, it's literally the abolishment of the state. So I mean,
so let me ask you this, Dario: how much liberty have you left if the state took 100% of your income in tax?
I mean, it would depend on like what your definition of liberty is. I guess I'm not a big fan of like 100% tax. I don't know what you're arguing against.
Well, would you argue that if the government takes 100% of my income in tax, I've lost 100% of my economic liberty?
I don't really know what this has to do with like the topic at hand. Is there like a large swath of like immigrants who are voting for?
Well, I'm just curious to know. I'm picking your brain here. Well, what if the government takes all of my money in the form of tax? Do I have any economic liberties left?
Well, no, not economic liberties, probably not. I mean, in terms of like doing what you're, I mean, it's a tautology, right? It's like saying, if I have zero money, do I have any money? No, I mean, of course not. Is there any is there any percentage of Americans who are for 100% in taxes?
Well, here you're doing the continuum fallacy, because if you argue that 100% tax would be 100% deprivation of liberty, then you'll have to recognize that 20% tax is also 20% of a removal of liberty from me and given to the state. Do you agree?
Well, no, not necessarily, right? It's a question. It's not necessarily a question of only economic freedoms, right? So the argument is,
my question is about economic freedom.
Yeah.
If the state takes 20% of my money, did I lose 20% of my economic output in the world? Did I lose 20% of my value economically?
Well, sure, but it's not a zero-sum game, right? You can get more back than you paid into the state through like economic incentives, through improvements that you couldn't make with your own money, right? Pooling money in general, like through a state or through a corporation or anything, is insanely economically beneficial. So you can get more economic value from
suppose
pooling.
That I do not consent. I do not consent to what the state will do with that 20%. Then it could be said that I have lost my liberty to dispose of this 20%, right? You're saying that forced taking of money from people is okay and desirable. You're not even a libertarian.
Well, no, wait.
You're a ridiculous libertarian, but you're also not a libertarian.
Okay. So Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
So let's say you live in a society, right, where you get to keep 100% of your money, but you live on an island alone, and you have no internet and no connection with the outside world. How much can you do with your money?
Well,
can you buy a smartphone like on an island by yourself? Can you buy a computer? Can you?
Are you a joke? Are you currently making the argument for taxation as a libertarian based on whether we can get iPhones?
Can you answer the
not?
question? Can you answer the question?
I don't know, because I don't know about your island. Is there a producer of
No, you're living alone.
You're living alone.
You're living alone.
I'm living alone. Well, if I'm living alone on an island, whether there's a government or not, I can't get an iPhone.
Yeah,
right.
Cool. So actually, the question that we're asking is, well, how much practical liberty or freedom do you have? How much freedom do you have to spend your money? How much do things cost in the society that you live, right? If prices of everything is cheaper because you paid in the 20%, then you have essentially more economic freedom, right? So if everything costs 40% less, but you have to pay 20% in taxes to make so it costs 40% less, then effectively you're gaining economic freedom.
It's not freedom, because I don't consent. I don't want my money to be pooled. But that makes me an actual libertarian, and you essentially someone who's a leftist who's dressing up his argument as libertarianism.
Sure. Can you tell me where within like libertarian mainstream thought like closing borders fits? I'm curious, because like even like the most vehement right-wing libertarians that I've talked to, like ANCAPs, everything, they're all for like open immigration because of the moral arguments that I presented, right? You're aggressing on people.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. It is true that most libertarians are not even respecting their own concepts, in the sense that they are committing to political beliefs that will eventually lead to the destruction of their liberty.
So just to be clear, you're saying most libertarians are wrong. That's what you're saying.
Most libertarians are wrong if they are taking position for open borders. I'm the last libertarian alive, I think.
Well, everybody else is wrong.
As far as my justification for borders, it is quite simple. It is the recognition that there are outside forces. That first, liberty does not stem from God or nature. I don't believe in God, and there's nothing in nature that forces you to respect the liberty of others. The lions don't respect the liberty of the antlers. So liberty doesn't stem from nature. Liberty is a social contract between humans capable of honoring it. The realization that will allow you to stand for borders while being a libertarian is the understanding that the people outside of the bubble of the social contract are unable to respect this social contract. There are simply humans on this earth who are unable to honor the guarantee of reciprocity under the NAP or under whatever social contract you agree on. There are certain people who will make babies who will be criminal on a higher proportion to protect yourself from these outside forces.
Sure. So I think I understand where you're going with this. I have a very important question in terms of just the libertarian side, I guess. How do you enforce a border with like a big swell, like a border as great as like the United States without having a state there to do that?
Oh, well, I do think that we should have a small state. I'm a minarchist, so I believe...
So you weren't a libertarian?
I'm a libertarian minarchist. There is such a thing as libertarian minarchist. It means that I'm for a small state that represents a small expense in the overall economy and which does collect some form of taxes. I would
wait, so you're for taxes?
Oh, yeah. I would hope that most of them are collected voluntarily. But I do think that an organization can exist that says, look, we are defending this country from outside forces you don't want to deal with, and therefore allow us to be funded enough to have a wall and have the personnel to keep these forces out. Now, ideally, I would want the people in this society to be free to be sovereign from it. So if someone says, I don't want your police service, I don't want your border, they could be able to create a small bubble or go live elsewhere. Ultimately, I'm for voluntary interactions as much as possible, but I also understand that the collective defense, that is the respect of the law, the police, the military, and the border control, are collective in nature, in that there's no way I can just border control myself and my neighbors.
So what if people don't want to pay taxes in your society? Like people just don't want to. Like what happens?
Well, I think that those societies where people don't support some sort of defense will eventually crumble and die.
Well,
but
sure.
The question is not there because most people do agree to defend a border. Most people in America are not against borders.
Wait, so generally, so this is, and again, like I'm not saying most Americans are for open borders. I don't think so. I think they should be, right? I think that's the most moral and economical position you can take. What I'm saying is most Americans generally view immigration pretty favorably. And saying that you want to limit immigration isn't just going to be a detriment to like those Americans, because there is drastic need in like the workforce. Like before COVID, the unemployment was like a historical low. It was like 3%, which is insane. Like that's insane for any like first world country. So you need a workforce to sort of keep the economy growing and make sure that people can retire in a timely manner. Right, that's what you need, and if the native population, I guess, isn't having enough children, so there, I guess, if we sort of extrapolate that and build into our society of libertarianism, we can say, well, if you want to create a fully voluntary society, I believe it's quite hypocritical for you to say that. Or bash me on the head to say that I support taxes, so I'm not a real libertarian because I support like left-wing policies, even though that doesn't necessarily mean like taxes. I don't know what you think like left-wing in general means. But then you turn around and say that you yourself are for taxes, but you just call them voluntary taxes, so it's okay. I don't understand the connection there. Can you elaborate?
Well, first, there's a fundamental difference between a voluntary taxation system and a forced one. Secondly, let's leave aside the question of voluntary. It doesn't even matter. The problem of your left-wing taxes that you're pushing for is that they are ultimately tools of redistribution of wealth. The taxes that I'm talking about, whether we implement them voluntarily or not voluntarily, they are not redistributions of wealth tools.
I'm curious. So to continue this conversation,
I just finish before you question. They are tools for the funding of a collective service that can only be collective. That is the defense of rights, military, and borders.
Well, sure. So first off, I take issue with your statement that it can only be collective. Like, I think there are anarchist societies in history that have existed where you can, and you would, I hope, agree with this as a libertarian as well, right? That you can have like a local police force that is just like voluntarily like people who are policing their community and their streets. Like, you don't need a state to facilitate like a police force or like a military even. Like, you can just.
But I didn't say you can't have a private police force. What I'm saying is, if you add a private police force, there would be inevitably people benefiting from it that are not paying for it.
Well,
now, that's the problem of the collective funding of police forces.
Wait, what? Okay, so I don't
it's
necessarily.
A problem because the free riders don't get to pay, and yet they benefit from the service.
Sure. So again, like, I don't know how you would structure, I guess, your voluntary taxes, and like what would happen if people didn't like opt in. Like, let's say you had like a city of people who didn't voluntarily like implement or like didn't voluntarily accept like your tax system or whatever. Like, that city would still benefit from all these surrounding cities paying taxes to like keep their cities safe, right? So you have the exact same problem. You've just reframed it.
The problem is I haven't committed to a voluntary tax. So you're owning on a point that is not the point I'm sticking to.
Is it a mandatory tax?
Maybe we would have to have a mandatory tax. What I will say, as far as the people refusing to pay tax, if that happened, there would be ways to punish these localities. We're seeing it in Portland right now. They're paying a high price for not wanting to pay the salaries of the police. We could have something like this. We could have a claim of sovereignty being made against a city that, okay, the city has turned too leftist, they don't want to contribute, we're not dealing with them anymore.
Wait, one sec, just want to jump in. I think just to tie this back to immigration.
Yeah, I was about to go there. So the reason why I am a libertarian and also for open borders or like immigration, like more immigration, I guess, in general, is because generally it fits pretty like well squarely inside like libertarian thought, right? Like, the only way that you would, I guess, escape that is if you think that the people outside of your state or your society don't deserve the same rights as the people within your society. Which is literally just like the, I guess, the statist point of view, right? It's like rights for me, but not for you. It's saying that the people within like the state deserve special treatment, and not everybody, right? It's not living principally.
Well, you're touching an important point. I don't believe that people outside of the state must be given all the rights of the people inside. And that's the current state of the US, by the way. Foreign entities do not have the same rights in court as domestic entities. There are certain lawsuits they can't make. There are certain claims they can't make. And thank God that this is the case, because the problem with rights is that when you start giving them to too many people, you end up with certain free riders who are able to profit from your giving their rights to them, but they are not able to reciprocate back. The rights that we've given in white civilization are absolutely wonderful, and I would hope that we add more rights. I'm
sorry. Did you say white civilization or white
civilization?
White.
The civilization that is white, with white people in it. Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Now, white civilization has given admirable rights to its people. The problem is that if you give these rights to everyone, you are faced with forces that white society has never been confronted with. What do you do when giving the rights to protest to a certain group of people, for example?
So I gotta stop you because we gotta go point by point, because I have like a lot of issues with what you said. So just that, like, you can keep going. We can just go down like all of your arguments. So the first argument that you made, sort of the, I guess, sort of slippery slope of giving people like rights that are like outside your country or whatever, like when they live there, and the sort of the issue of like freeloaders and stuff. Like, are there no white freeloaders in America? Like, are there no? Yeah. So why are you against them as well?
Did I say there are no white freeloaders in America? So why would you attack me on a point I haven't said?
Well,
that
no,
doesn't make sense.
Well, no.
In fact, let me be more interesting than what you're proposing there, and let me continue the sentence. You cut me for this low-tier attack that has nothing to do, and no, it's a strawman. Okay?
You said white.
Let me complete my sentence.
White civilization, and then you complained about immigrants being freeloaders.
So when I'm talking about white civilization, does it mean that everyone in white civilization is not a free rider? No, it doesn't mean this. Well, it means a civilization that is white.
Okay. Well, yeah, sure. And then I'm asking you, well, how do you deal with freeloaders in that society, which you seem to be very against? Like, wouldn't it make sense to just like have no freeloaders regardless of like their skin color?
Oh, absolutely. So we do need a mechanism to reject freeloading from all places in all ways. And that includes disciplining, for example, criminal behavior in white society. That includes denying certain rights, even sometimes. For example, the example that I was about to provide. You provide a right to protest. You provide a right to protest to a couple of Europeans. They come with their tiki torches or whatever. They have their little ads and they have their little signs that they hold. And and as Europeans, just so you know, I include Europeans. I include American whites as of European descent.
Yeah. I am one of the base Europeans.
Oh, you're one of those?
Yeah, I'm one of those, yeah.
Well, given that you also self-define as a libertarian who likes leftism and communism, I think there are issues with your self-understanding there. Oh. But let's continue. When you provide a right to protest to a certain European population, you're going to get a certain percentage of them that will end up making violence, vandalism, criminality. You provide the same right to another population, and the amount of criminality could be increased by 6-fold or 12-fold for certain ethnicity, certain groups. So the problem is providing the same rights to everyone doesn't lead to the same response. Some rights you can provide them to minorities and they will use it to hurt you. This is what the libertarians must understand. The balance of liberty is extremely fine. And when you give too much of it, you're going to end up with costs that are much bigger than if you were to give those rights only to a select few, those who have proven historically that they will not misuse them.
Sure. So let me get this straight and let me know if I'm misinterpreting you. You're saying that some ethnicities, even white ethnicities, I guess in Europe, have a higher propensity to do things that you don't like. So therefore, they should not be necessarily afforded the same rights as like other ethnicities. Is that correct?
Well, in a way, yes.
Okay.
But I don't have a concept of affording certain rights. They should not, because I'm a moral nihilist. So I don't think there should be anything.
No, yeah, sure.
What I'm saying is, as a political agent myself, it is not in my interest to associate with these groups that do not respect reciprocity in terms of the social contract we want to establish.
Sure. So do you believe in the concept of thought policing?
Thought policing, do I believe in it? Well, there are certainly people who thought police others.
Sure. Well, do you believe it's a good thing to like police people for what they think? You mentioned earlier as well that you had, I don't know if you had issue with it, but you alluded to like some people, for example, not respecting people's right to speak, right? So they would want to punish people for just speaking rather than doing actions, correct? So in the same,
they would want to use force for people just using their speech.
Yeah. So I want to sort of, I guess, bring an analogy to this concept over to sort of what you're talking about now, right? Because whenever you talk about sort of ethnicities or minorities having like a higher percentage chance to do a thing you don't like, be it crime, be it a vote or whatever, right? What you're essentially saying is that before that person does something bad, before that person commits a crime, you want to preemptively exclude them based on what they think or what their race is or what they're saying. Like before they do something bad, you want to take preemptive action. I think that is that is very vehemently like anti-libertarian and anti like other things that you've said you stand for.
So, for example, would you say it's anti-libertarian if I see a fat woman in the bar, and as a result of her being fat, I decide not to engage in marriage with her?
Well, no, because that's your like personal like autonomy, right? So the difference.
So now I have personal autonomy in the domain of sex, but I don't in the domain of politics. Explain to me the
not
difference
in terms of,
here, because that's also preemptive action that I'm doing in the bar when I'm not fucking the fat woman.
Well, hey, no, listen. So from my personal experience, like fat women are pretty good and bad. Like they work super hard, so I would condemn you on that point entirely. But the difference between what you're explaining and what we're talking about is that we're talking about systemic issues or like systemic decisions to be done about people, not your personal preferences in terms of who you would want to fuck.
Well, I have personal preferences about who I want to make societies with. Can I have those?
Well, depends on what you mean by can. I guess if you want to, like even in the US right now, you could just move to like a rural area and like surround yourself with white people and live with white people till the end of time. I mean, if that's what you want. I mean,
that's what I want.
Yeah, sure. And you can do that, right? But you'd still be a part of like a greater society, a greater world that you're benefiting from just by being a person, a citizen of the world, right? You're benefiting from innovation, from science that's done by like all the different countries, like from China, India, from the Middle East, like inventions, science, innovation. Like you're benefiting from people who immigrate to the US and start businesses and do innovation there, right? Just by being alive. So I think, I mean, acknowledging that and sort of allowing that to happen and allowing the world to prosper collectively, I would think that would be a good thing, like regardless of where you personally live and who you surround yourself with.
In terms of the productions that humanity benefit from, they come from everywhere on planet Earth, but they disproportionately come from a country, America, and to a certain extent, Europe. There are countries that had a homogeneous population that was highly creative, that was favoring liberty enough to create these conditions for creativity to express itself.
Yeah, but like,
as far as we know, the America in 100 years that you dream of will not be able to generate the same innovations that it was capable of doing 100 years ago.
Wait, but what you're saying isn't really borne out in the data, right? Like 1 in 4 businesses right now in the US are started by immigrants. Like more and more like tech companies or like big companies in general are hiring a very diverse cast of people like to their jobs and prospering because of it. Like we're living in the most prosperous time there's ever been, and the result is people hiring more diverse people because they're recognizing having a diversity of thought and a diversity of opinion is economically beneficial, and economists agree, right? I mean, it's a very, very much studied subject.
It's a ridiculous subject that is very poorly studied. The kind of study that you refer to here that associate diversity and productivity, they can't even tell correlation from causation. There is no evidence, there is no causal evidence that diversity in a corporation induces productivity. What's happening is that we live under systems of compellment of who employs who because of state laws, among other things, that force corporations to hire migrants. So no surprise that you find yourself in downtown and you look at corporation and it's like, oh my God, it's diverse and it's successful. It's not necessarily because it's diverse that it's successful. What's happening is that the successful companies are being forced by the state to hire people they might not have hired other than to respect these laws. It is complement that leads to an illusion of causality.
I mean, listen, if you disagree with the scientists, the sociologists, and the economists, I mean, sure. I mean, you can have your critiques. I mean, I'll choose to trust them. Generally,
I wipe my ass with their studies.
Okay.
I print their studies and I wipe my ass with it. That's how I disagree with them.
How do you come to your conclusions? I'm curious. Like, where do you study these things?
Precisely by not listening to others, precisely by not making appeals to authority. One day you'll become an adult, Dario, and you'll realize that the way to reach the truth in life is to acquire facts and make your own judgments based on these facts that you have acquired or observed.
What's wrong with appealing to authority, right? You can't be the smartest person on every single topic, right? You have to appeal to authorities on that subject. That isn't necessarily fallacious. Like, are you alluding to the fallacy?
Yeah, I'm alluding to the fallacy.
Wait, do you know what the fallacy is about?
Oh my God. Are you one of these leftists who have convinced themselves that the appeal to authority is not always a fallacy?
Wait. If you're having like a medical condition and you go to the hospital and your doctor tells you it's cancer, do you just go and then say, but I bet it's not cancer because I have studied medicine and I know best? Like, no, of course you trust the authorities because you're not an expert on everything, JF. I hope you don't think so.
My God, at this point, I'm doing humanitarian work, giving an education to a poor Eastern European. My poor man. Let me explain to you where you are fetishes in this example with the doctor.
Hey, dude, I'm an immigrant in Denmark. I've started my own business. I'm doing great, dude. Like, I'm okay. We're building the economy.
You started your own business and you need to be educated on basic fallacious structure in philosophy. I mean, this is an example of what I'm talking about. There's a problem here happening. Let's talk about it. When you say, do you say to your doctor, no, that's not cancer because you're a doctor? You're committing the authority fallacy again. The problem is not whether it's a doctor telling me if I have cancer or not. The question is he making his decisions based on an observed fact, which is a scan of my lungs or whatever organ is affected? If it's based on the scan, then it's not an appeal to authority. If you're just going around and saying, I have the cancer because my doctor told me so, then yes, you are committing the authority fallacy.
So just for the chat and everybody listening in, so the appeal to authority fallacy is when you appeal to an authority that is not an authority on that subject, but an authority on something else. So that would be like appealing to a medical doctor when citing issues about climate change or whatever, something that they're not familiar with. That is the appeal to authority fallacy. It is not just like saying you trust authorities on a subject. That would be preposterous. Like, we would never be able to study anything.
I know that, pardon my interruption, I know that, JF, you've got another round in the chamber ready to fire, but just because I pardon my audio, folks, I was just saying that, pardon my interruption, and JF, I know, has another round in the chamber. I'm sure you do, JF. But just because to kind of circle back to some of these immigration issues in particular before we have to go to the Q&A, as people have really been enjoying this, and so we want to keep going with those. If you guys can bounce it back to some of those.
So there was actually one of the studies that you mentioned, JF. I'm very familiar with that study, the one from the National Academic Press. You said that that the study says that immigrants have a net fiscal impact on society. I've read that study. You're misrepresenting it quite a bit. Like, what it says is that first generation natives, or like first generation immigrants, are more costly than native born fiscally. Yes, a little bit, that is true. But already second generation and like second generation immigrants are among the strongest fiscal economic contributors in the US, and that only grows in like the third generation. So I mean, that's just a insane misrepresentation of that study. And like the other study that you mentioned was from the 70s. Like, we've got way more recent studies that show that generally immigration is like a net wash on fiscal, impact, and a great economic boon. Like from like 2015, 2016. Like, why would you start a study from the 70s?
I will hereby list the dates of my study to show how ridiculous this man is. The dates are 2014, 2017, 2015, 2003. There is not a study from the 70s.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I might have misheard.
Now, what he's saying is, oh, maybe three generations down the line, you're going to have your effect of net wealth drain diluted to a point where it's relatively small. And
well, no, it was second.
And then what? Second generation, no matter how many generations it takes, you are still undergoing a cost. That cost has not been reimbursed. On top of it, the descendants of these immigrants will still fall into the demographic categories that are more likely to cause crimes. How much money do you put on a young girl being murdered for saying all lives matter in America? How much money is that worth to you? Now, let's come back to something, because you mentioned...
Can we address that specific... Wait, can we address that?
Yeah,
just quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you believe in the concept?
How much is a girl killed worth?
Because
she said all lives matter.
The one before that, where you talked about fiscal.
This one you don't want to engage with.
Oh, right? Yeah, I really do. So do you believe in the concept of investment? Right, generally, because I'm somebody who like talks to investors and like works with investment as well to some extent, right? So generally, the way that investment works is that you put down some money short term in order to grow that money long term. Like you get a net gain in the wealth that is generated because you were able to take a short-term economic loss by building something new, right? That is how generally all economic growth works. Like it's very rare to find something where you can literally just pour money in like today and get more money today, right? That's not how it works, right? So that is why second generation is really important. And when we can say that first generation is a fiscal loss, like slightly, like very slightly, but second generation is the strongest fiscal contributor, I'd say that's a pretty good investment. Like, do you have like anything? That's literally the study you mentioned.
It's not a good investment. It's not a good investment because you have changed the demographics of your country that will be long-term hurtful. These people will vote left. These people will end up committing more crimes, and you have not yet accounted for these crimes. So always be careful when someone sells you an investment and doesn't include all of the cost of it at the end.
Sure. So when we talk about crimes and like why people commit crimes, I mean, this is very much studied in criminology, right? And criminology says that generally, like people, there is like two reasons why people would commit crimes, right? The first is the rational choice theory, which says that people are rational beings, and if crime is perceived to be a better option than non-crime, you will do it, right? You can fix this by creating a better economy, by creating better jobs, by making sure that people have better options than resulting to crime, which is again achieved by having more immigration because you build society up. The other theory is the cultural transmission theory, that if you, it's kind of similar, but not exactly. It is that concept that if you're not giving the option to succeed in the culture that you're in, you will find other ways to maintain sort of your honor or whatever that means to you, right? And I believe you'll be interested in that. And the way that you can sort of address those things is by making sure that the structural inequalities that exist in whatever society, or what is making sure that they cannot succeed regardless of how hard they work, that those are mitigated. And those are generally the reasons why people commit crime. Like people just don't just commit crimes randomly.
And there we go. We have gone full circle where we have a libertarian arguing for a communistic redistribution of access to work and opportunity, where not only are we forced to welcome people in our nation, we should also give them jobs so that they don't kill us. We should also give them this and that. Ultimately, what we have is a drainage. It's a drainage of wealth. It's a drainage of wealth, a drainage of opportunity, and I oppose to it. That being said, I would feel terrible if we didn't get a chance to go back to
Can you define communism for me? Can you just real quick, just for my sanity? Can you?
Communism is entitlement to other people's work.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the Wikipedia page of Argument from Authority. They have actually written a paragraph for people like you. Appeal to false authority. A similar fallacy to the appeal to authority is the appeal to false authority. This fallacy is used when a person
so you
uses
agree?
a
So
false
you
authority.
recognize it isn't the same, right? So you're saying there's a different name because it's not the same as the one that I talked about.
No, I'm saying that you got the wrong name. That your definition of an appeal to authority is actually an appeal to false authority.
Sure. Wait,
that
so
you need some philosophical courses before you go on the internet, say stupid crap.
Cool. So what I'm generally for is not communism, right? I'm not arguing for communism. I'm literally arguing within a capitalist framework how to produce better outcomes for everybody in society. I'm not talking about giving people jobs and like taking government jobs, just creating useless government jobs and giving them to people. No, that isn't what happens to immigrants. That isn't what happens to immigrants in the United States. What happens is that, what happens is that there is an influx in labor. And that labor builds more demand, and that generally means that native-born people either are upgraded in their positions or they have the ability to now start new businesses because there is new demand, new consumers, new workforce that works in society. That is why, even though there's a lot of immigration in the US right now, the amount of unemployment keeps falling, JF.
Oh, yeah, it does. That's not my problem. As you've seen from my 6 problems, I haven't mentioned the unemployment rate in any of them. The problem is that you are largely in a fictive economy where fake demand is being created by the actions of the state. You have fake demand in the sense that the state hires a lot of people it actually doesn't need. So you also have fake demand in the sense that the state forces corporations to do stuff that they wouldn't do usually, such as preserve a certain racial quotas.
Wait, the state has only there's only 1% civilian federal workers, 1% of the entire workforce. What are you talking about? Like the vast majority of workers in the United States are just people working in businesses, like private businesses. I don't understand.
You're not a very good listener. You're not a very good listener because I've already answered to your question. The state is not only creating fake demand by its own employment, it's creating fake demand by forcing corporations to reach racial and sexual and handicapped-based quotas. It is forcing corporations to diversify its workforce by threat of violence, threat of imprisonment, or threat of fines. So you're not in a natural economy here. You are in an economy where fake demand has been created, a demand for a workforce that may not even be needed.
Okay, so first off, I don't understand what you mean by needed or not needed. So and I also don't understand what affirmative action has to do with necessarily with immigration. We're talking about immigrants coming into the country and whether or not they're beneficial to the economy. And it seems like the vast majority of economists agree that they are economically beneficial. Now, there's some disagreement about the fiscal impact. That is a mixed result. But at the very most, what the fiscal impact is very short term in the line of what an investment is, right? You're investing in the future of the country. And if the current population of that country isn't making more babies, right? It isn't going fucking ching fucking down the fucking southeast or whatever and creating a bunch of babies. What is needed is immigrants to fill those slots.
There are so many ways in which you're wrong here. In terms of your hate of baby making, baby making is an important thing, especially for preserving the demographics of a nation, but also preserving your own gene representations in the natural ecosystems that humanity is. That being said, before the baby making stuff, you were saying stuff, and I would say I think there are more people intelligent in the regular chat right now than you, because in a discussion,
I would hope so. I'm not that intelligent.
In a discussion where I've given you the definition of an appeal to authority, where you seem to misunderstanding at first, you did it again. you still appeal to authority. In this debate, I've been listing the facts on which I base my view. As Dario listed his facts, no.
Yeah,
He's saying the economists think this. I don't
Wait,
give a shit
I'm
what the
literally
economists
citing
think.
you studies. I'm literally citing you studies as we
You're
speak.
citing conclusions, not facts.
No,
and that makes you
wait. So when
an argument from authority.
Wait, so when I say that immigration is an economic benefit, like you can measure the amount of dollars created, like that it is an economic benefit, but sometimes it can be a fiscal loss short term, which then grows to be a fiscal boon on second generation, just like an investment. Or when I speak about who gains from wages, right? When I say that 2% of wages are decreased for high school dropouts, is that me just stating conclusions, or is that me giving you the facts and data that is shared by economists all around the globe, JF, appealing to the authority of people who have PhDs in this topic that we're talking about? I would say that is more than fair.
You just did it again. That being said, now you're beginning to touch some facts, so we can talk about them. Let's compare my facts to yours. My facts were always in reference to how people in the end were hurt. They were hurt either because their capacity to negotiate better salaries were hurt. They were hurt by criminality. They were hurt by leftism. Now you're saying the coming of immigrants is beneficial to the economy, that they are creating dollars. What does that mean to me? What does the creation of dollar mean? If the Fed is printing $1 billion next morning, is it the creation of dollar too? Am I benefiting from it?
Well, you could
it's
be.
It's the same. It's an inflation of a system from which I benefit nothing.
Sure. So there was a lot of points there. Let's address them one at a time, okay? So the first one, talking about the ability to like negotiate wages or whatever is hurt by immigrants. I mean, sure, that's like a like you can make that like a truism, or like a I guess an argument from not understanding the literature, I guess. But if the literature says that the wages, the average American wages, are rising, yes, from those people that have like they're like immigrants going in and like doing similar jobs, even those people get a rise in their wages, then how are they being hurt by this? I don't understand. And then when we're talking specifically about how you feel your society growing economically, you feel it in a number of ways. You feel it in the technology that you consume. You feel it in the prices of things in the society, the prices of food, the like all of these beautiful things that come out of human competition, of human innovation. And those innovation and competition and all of these things are driven by people. The more people, the more innovation, the more competition, the better society. That is what economics unilaterally mean.
That is your fallacy. There was a people that was creating great stuff, and in fact it created such a wave of increases of productivity and technology that we still today benefit from the creations of white Europeans from the 60s, from the 40s, from the 20s. They really did it well. It's
sure,
not because you add more people in the mix that you increase productivity. It depends on the people you add. And as we've seen from the numbers, it doesn't look like I'm benefiting from much inventions and much greatness produced by the migrants. You're assuming that the presence of these migrants in current economy ultimately makes them the cause of the successes of our economy. Let me correct that. Well, the successes of our economy are caused by things that were created before I was even alive. We wouldn't be on the path that we are on right here if it wasn't of the people that created these things in the 80s, 60s, and 40s.
Listen, Jeff. Jeff, are you seriously?
What we'll do, one sec, pardon my interruption. I promise I'll kick it right back to you, Dario, because I know that you were about to respond there. Just want to let you guys know that maybe a couple more back and forth, and we'll probably go into Q&A. So at some point, whenever one or either of you is up to defer to the other, giving them the last word, awesome. Otherwise, in about 5 minutes, I'll bring us into the Q&A.
Sure,
Go ahead,
sure.
Dario.
That's fine. Yeah, I guess this is like a nonsensical point, right? This is saying that you are arbitrarily choosing, like you didn't even mention them. You were just alluding that there are some inventions that you value and that every like piece of human prosperity is built off of. That's preposterous, right? Like the reason why we live in such unprecedented, like times of just consumption and wealth and enjoyment in most places of the world is because of the immense globalization that has happened, right? It is because you're able to let people produce the things that they are best at. It is because you're able to outdelegate labor to those people who think they can do it better than others, right? And oftentimes those people exist outside of your country, right? Just because you have a economy within the country, you very much have a globalized economy of people purchasing your products all around the globe. You have people producing your products all around the world, and the reason why these products are so easily and accessible in such great quantities is because of this. It is because of the immense amount of human labor that goes into producing the life that you have right now, JF.
What a beautiful way to end on a concession and an agreement. It is wonderful what Dario is just talking about here. The possibility of letting the Asian people live in Asia and engage in trade with us. If they are so good at producing stuff, let us buy their stuff that they produce from Asia and bring it here. We don't need to bring them on the territory. It is absolutely fine to have nations that do trade. I'm not against trade, by the way. I'm against the free flow of people in ways that are hurtful to local communities and the demographic constitution of nations. So let us engage in more global trade. I agree.
Well, no, hey, actually, we might actually agree on this, right? I am also against people coming in and lowering the life of everybody in that interaction, right? It just so happens that this isn't happening, right? It just so happens that this is not substantiated any literature, economic or otherwise, right? It is a net gain for society. They're not criminals. They're not like ruining society. They're just coming in, doing, trading, living. And that is what makes America so great. That is why a lot of countries should aspire to be like America, or what I would say, the best America that it can be.
This might be a good transition. Given that we had JF start, we will give the last word there to Dario, and want to say thanks for your questions, folks. As mentioned, folks, if you weren't here at the start, I had mentioned that both of the speakers, I put their links in the description for you folks if you want to hear more, including I've updated it. I've got your book, if I remember right, The Revolutionary Phenotype, JF.
Absolutely.
In the description as well, folks, and we'll jump into these questions. So thanks so much. For our first question from Brakir, said, Papa JF, when is The Moral Signal coming out? Is that an up-and-coming book?
Oh, yeah, it's an up-and-coming book. I'm working hard, but I think that the next time I may hope to release it may be for the Christmas season of this December. But I have to give myself a dedication to it. I might be able to do it.
Excellent. And Joshua Larson, thanks for your question, said, or comment, they said the side view thumbnail definitely makes Pepir JF look good. So a lot of fans here. Religion is BS. Thanks for your question, said, from what I've seen, the majority of conservatives are for immigration from places like Sweden, etc., yet against immigration from places such as Yemen. And they said, this seems to me they want white people only, or am I wrong? I don't know if you'd consider yourself
myself. I'm a libertarian. Conservatives, they have taken a route that I don't like, which is negotiate with the left and concede to the left. So I don't like this that much. As far as wanting whites, I'm actually against even white immigration. For other reasons, I do believe that maintaining the state of heterogeneity in the diversity of the European peoples is a good thing. I'm proud of being a Quebecois, being part of a small white population in North America that doesn't speak English as its first language. I think we should maintain that type of things. Now, of course, white immigration is much less hurtful than other forms of immigration, but I think that for preserving this state of heterogeneity, it's still desirable to combat this type of immigration.
Would you support my immigration into the U.S., Jeff?
No, not after tonight.
Gotcha.
Now, I'm not in the U.S., so you don't have to be worried.
Can I get some pepper hands in chat?
Next up, we have a question from The Optimistic Pessimist. Thanks for your question. Said, the crime point from Dario doesn't hold up. If you control for the native population correctly, you have no control for race within the native population.
Well, yeah, that is why, because I said native population, right? Like the races that are native are the native population, right? And it does still hold up, right? And what happens with immigrants over time is that they assimilate into numbers that are on average the same as the native population, right? And if you just, and even I'll even give you this, right? If you look at each group of immigrants and break them down by race, so like having like Hispanic immigrants or Asian immigrants and whatever, like each immigrant, like compared to the racial equivalent of the person living in the US, they still commit less crime, right? So like Asian immigrants commit less crime than native Asians, like Hispanic immigrants commit less crime than Hispanic, and so on, right? So I mean, yeah.
It's unbelievable, the cognitive twist. Of course, when you compare an immigrant of a certain race to the same race in the US, what you don't reveal by this is that immigration systematically changes the demographics of a country of the US so that there are more Hispanic people or that there are more Asians. And so if this
we're talking
race
percentages. We're talking per capita,
yeah,
like percent.
We are increasing the number of Hispanics, percentage of Hispanic in the US with immigration. And so you have to take that into account, and you'll end up calculating that, yes, you are increasing the crime because you are increasing the representation of demographics that commit crimes.
Wait. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, right? So I'm talking about the percentage of that race or whatever you want to call it, ethnicity or whatever, that commits crime. So it is that only that ethnicity compared to itself. And when you do that, the people who are immigrants still commit less than and sometimes in insane numbers, right? So I believe it was Hispanics who committed Hispanic immigrants committed 7 times less crime than native-born Hispanic people compared to themselves.
Thanks for taking us through your ridiculous cognitive hoop, which allows you to ignore the fact that these Hispanic immigrants will have Hispanic babies in the US that you will label as native, that will end up committing crimes. Everyone on the regular chat is seeing through that bullshit. So you can formulate it in 100 ways, it's still crap.
Well, just because the challenge was originally for Dario, I'll give Dario the last word, and then we've got to move on to the next one. You have a short and pithy response.
Yeah, so yeah, obvious. I mean, after a lot of generations, yeah, sure, they assimilate into like native like crime levels. But I mean, at what point do they become a native, right? If it's like 3rd or 4th, or even 5th gen, like holy fuck, like they've been in the US for so many years. Yeah, of course, they're natives. Yeah.
Got a next question from Zim X02. Thanks for your question. Said, spending 1 penny collectively to afford free energy yields more economic freedom than keeping that penny. Libertarianism is left wing. You poser.
True.
Let's see. So, JF, you got a critic out there.
No, I think it was a critique to Dario. I think that he is accusing Dario of being a fake libertarian. That being said, yes, libertarianism is incompatible with leftism because under libertarianism, you can't force people to pay tax, and therefore you can't adjust the outcomes and fix the inequalities of society by stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Simple as that.
We'll jump to the...
Okay, can I answer that? I guess sure. JF alluded that it was for me or whatever.
Sure.
So I maybe you're just not informed or whatever, but like literally if you just look up like even like Wikipedia, like literally says like if you look up libertarianism on Wikipedia in the very first like in the second paragraph, to be fair, it says libertarianism originated as a form of left-wing politics such as anti-authoritarianism or anti-state socialist like anarchist, especially social anarchist, but more generally libertarian, communist, Marxist, and libertarian socialists. That is the origination of libertarianism as a concept. So I don't know where you're getting this from, but I mean, sure. I mean, you can just go and read about it.
Oh yeah, that's because the original Marxists deceived themselves into thinking that they were pursuing liberty, but they were not. Of course, they were pursuing the forced taking of property from the rich. So it was ridiculous. But yeah, they thought they were libertarian, yes.
I guess they didn't have voluntary taxes.
We'll jump into the next one, which is from Religion is BS. This one is for you, Dario. They say, where do you stand politically, left, right, or centrist? I'd be interested in having a conversation depending on your response.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm very firmly on the left. And when I say on the left, I mean like very much like socially and like sort of, I mean, I generally agree with like leftist type arguments, but I've definitely had a lot of agreement with like even libertarians on the right. Like I have a lot of them in my chat and we talk about things and we agree on the vast majority of things and sort of the way that we can structure society. Yeah, I mean, I say I'm a libertarian, like libertarian socialist, libertarian leftist. Some even call me an anarchist. I mean, I think a lot of those are synonymous in many ways. So yeah.
Gotcha. And next we have a question from Zimex02 again. It says, JF doesn't understand that libertarianism is a socialist, and he's talking about, quote, lack of understanding, and then they say terminal Dunning-Kruger. So it's that same critic, but go ahead, JF, if you want.
I mean, I'm faced with, I didn't know you guys existed. You guys lack culture. I mean, go to the political compass. You will see that libertarianism is very well on the right. So I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about. Go educate yourselves.
Wait, literally? I mean, okay, first off, the political compass is a hilarious way to like represent politics. Second off, libertarianism is like the top-down axis, right? Like,
yes,
you can have like down and then left and down and then right.
Yeah, you are right. There are libertarian leftists. They self-identify as such. What they really are is that they are not libertarian on the economic axis. But you can see if you travel through the economic axis from left to right, what you will see on the left are authoritarian people wanting to steal people's money. On the right, you'll see libertarian people wanting to let the free market operate. So I don't know what you guys are talking about.
So you're not talking about the political compass, right? Because the political compass has like libertarianism as like one axis, which is like the bottom, and then you can have left or right. Like that's the political compass, right?
I am talking about certain illustrations of these where you will see figures. You will see figures that are right-wing, and you will see that these right-wing figures are for liberty when they are on the right economically, and they are for possession of wealth when they are on the left. That's it.
Do you consider anarchists like right-wing or...
Anarchist, the problem with the term is that it is being used for Antifa type anarcho-communist, and it is being used also.
I'm talking about the ideology. Yeah. So like anarchist, like the ideology of anarchism, like that's seems like a very like distinctly like left-wing ideology, right? I mean, that is for the abolition of state and like pretty much all hierarchies in society, right? So you can't say that that's like a redistributionist, like, I mean, maybe esoterically so, but it's like, I mean, I don't know how you would square that with your point of view.
Well, the thing is, anarchism is not an ideology. There are people who are libertarian right, and they self-define as anarchists, like Stéphane Molyneux, for example. So, I mean, I don't know what you're asking me for. Anarchism is not a philosophy. It's a word that is used by people sometimes that are communist and sometimes that are libertarian.
Okay.
Next, we'll jump into the next question, which comes in from, let's see. This one's for you, Dario. They said, this is Spark344.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question. Says, no one is talking about being able to abuse foreigners within your border. The issue is how much influence they should have in your country, such as voting or work.
I mean, sure. I mean, if you're worried about that, I mean, you can just skew it however much you like. That doesn't really change the answer of like, should you have more immigration, right? So even, and I'm not by any means advocating for this, right? But even like, if you really don't think they should have any rights, or they shouldn't participate in society necessarily on the same level as like native borns, it is still better for everyone to get them into your country, to work in your country, to be as productive as they can, even if they aren't real citizens, even if you don't provide them the same rights. Like if they're willing to come to work in your country under those conditions, that means that the place that they're leaving is worse for them, right? So they are improving their lives, even if their lives are shitty. They're improving their lives and you're improving your society, right? So you can slide that however much you want. It's still going to be beneficial to have immigrants working in your country.
Gotcha. And Zimex02, again for you, JF, they've got your number. They say, this reprobate JF doesn't even know what, quote, fallacy means. Not all valuable inferences are deductive. And they say philosophers defer to epistemic gurus.
Yeah, I don't give a shit about this argument. You're confused. Go read. I don't care. You are saying deductive when this has nothing to do with what I've said. The appeal to authority fallacy has been committed on this show. Everyone can see it. Everyone was laughing at it. And I'll keep laughing at it for the rest of my life. Because my God, was it hilarious to see Dario not understand what the appeal to authority means.
Gotcha. Next, this one is for Dario from James W. Thanks for your question. Said,
hell yeah.
So people in other nations enacted leftist policies that didn't work. They didn't make them happy. Now they want to move to a country like America and implement the same policy?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by like leftist policies that didn't work. I mean, if you look at like some of the most like, I guess, left-leaning countries, I mean, you can look at the Scandinavian countries. I guess you can look at Denmark, right? The country that I'm currently in. Like Denmark is often cited as the happiest country in the world. Like it is a country that has the lowest like income inequality of pretty much any country. I think if you look at like the Gini index, you can look at like how it correlates with crime, like all of these things. Like there is not a lot of crime, there's a lot of equality. And if you look at, I believe it's Norway, like Norway has more like billionaires, or is it millionaires per capita, than the US has, right? So like all of these countries that have very quote-unquote left-wing, I guess, policies are generally doing way better, like based on their size and their population, than the US is, right? I mean, yeah.
Gotcha. And religion is BS. Thanks for your question. Said James, I shot you an email about debating JF on politics more generally. They're calling you out, JF. We can't help but love
politics.
They said, hope we can set it up. I know you're busy. JF's busy, I'm sure, too. We'll see. We can play that one by ear. We'll see what topics might work. Let me just double check in case I missed any questions. So thanks so much for your questions, folks. Both of our guests are linked in the description. We are trying to reform. As last week, I think some of you were here, one or two of our debates were they went off the rails. I was gone. Converse was here. But anyway, just the point is, we do encourage you in the comments. We're trying to cultivate a culture. We'll give them a little crap. I mean, these guys they've got thick skin. They've been on the internet for a while, so they're tough. They're going to be fine. But at the same time, we do want to encourage you to direct your arguments, or I should say criticisms, at the arguments and ideas rather than the people. So we do want to say one last thanks. I think that was it for our questions. So thank you, JF, and thank you very much, Dario. It's been a pleasure